Siamo arrivati forse a una delle conversazioni più interessanti della 2 giorni. Invito sul palco Theos Evgeniou, no? Evgeniou, che converserà con il professor Tomaso Poggio sul futuro dell'intelligenza artificiale. Non presento il professor Poggio perché non sono capace di riassumere la sua figura, forse lo scienziato italiano in questo momento più rilevante nel mondo, e vi invito a leggere la pagina di Wikipedia dedicata a lui.
First of all, it's an honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you for organizing this and great crowd. I didn't understand what you were talking about, but it sounded very interesting. Let me start by emphasizing that probably the reason we are all here today, and we can talk about those amazing things like innovation, opportunities, better health, better society, leveraging technology like artificial intelligence. The reason we are here, the number one reason we are here, I would argue, is because some people asked and answered, at least partly, some major questions. One of them is Tommy Poggio, who for the past 50 years has been asking the questions, what is intelligence, how can we engineer it, and what can we do with it? And if we didn't have these people in the history of humanity, we would not be here today, and none of you would talk about the opportunities we can have today. We should not forget this. And that's the reason I'm very happy to be here with Tommy, and also with his wonderful partner, Barbara, who, as we all know, did the tough work. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Tommy. Tommy was always saying, the greatest of the great problems is the question of intelligence. MIT now has a quest for intelligence built largely on his work. It's no surprise that one of his postdocs, we all know Demis Hassabis, the co-founder of DeepMind and now head of Google AI, and also Nobel Prize winner in chemistry this year for AlphaFold. I highly encourage you to watch his Nobel Prize speech, where Tommy was also present, where he talks about the opportunities and the amazing innovations ahead of us because of AI, like personalized medicine and new discoveries, which we could not even imagine ever in the history of humanity, again because of people who ask the right questions, hence we are here for that, said, which I think is in DeepMind's offices from what I understand, our goal is to solve intelligence. You see the correlation with Tommy's quest for intelligence. And then use that to solve basically all other problems of the world. Think about what this means. Think about what we have in our hands today that we never had before to solve big problems. And this, of course, is not just theoretical, it's very practical. I'll give you an example. As our algorithms, our data, and our compute improve, the x-axis, so does our intelligence that we create, the artificial intelligence, the accuracy, the performance, the quality, the y-axis. And as this happens, we cross the intelligence of your products, and you should ask a question, how intelligent are your products? Because they are not intelligent, they are not competitive. Therefore, Italy is not competitive, and neither is Europe, if you don't have intelligent products and services. Intelligence is a requirement for your business. Otherwise, forget about your business. And as the quality of intelligence improves, we cross boundary after boundary after boundary, the yellow lines, that allow new and new and new opportunities. Personalized medicine, AI medical devices, automatic detection of diseases, treatment recommendations, autonomous cars, etc., etc., etc. Robotics coming soon. And that's what's changing the world, the continuous improvement of how good AI will be. This has huge implications for society and, of course, for business and the economy. It also has huge implications for geopolitics. AI is the one topic I'm aware of where one has to think about science, math, engineering, product, business, regulations, philosophy, geopolitics, history. I cannot think of any other topic that requires all these kind of dimensions. This is just some books that I find fascinating, talking about China, talking about the age of AI by people like Henry Kissinger, who spent the later part of his life on this topic, because obviously AI determines not only the balance of powers, like the book Technology and the Rise of Great Powers indicates, but also the economic competition between businesses, and countries, and regions, and nations. There are estimates in the order of tens of trillions of value created because of AI. One question that I always ask to executives that come to INSEAD is how much of those trillions will your company or your country capture the next 5 to 10 years? Because if you don't capture it, somebody else will. And how do you do this? Again, we are here because of major innovations, specifically for AI, around data, compute, and algorithms. And of course, behind all those things, there are people. Data, probably all of us. Compute, Turing. Algorithms, Tommy. Somebody who has spent his life being around amazing people, working and exchanging with names that you all recognize. So it's an honor to be here. Tommy, thank you very much for everything you've done. Tommy.
No, go ahead. Don't worry.
Oh. Okay, fine. So thank you for everything. I start with a simple question for you, which is difficult. You stumbled, or maybe you ran into this topic of intelligence more than 50 years ago by now, probably?
Yeah, more.
How did you predict 50 years ago that we would be here today? Or how did you run into this field? How did you run into this intelligence? What drove you there?
Well, quite simple. I think when I was a kid and spending a lot of time with the Biblioteca Treccani of my father, I got really very impressed by the work of Einstein, not without understanding all of it. And I realized soon that I was not as smart as Einstein, and there were many more problems to solve than just relativity, space and time. And so very soon I thought that the real big problems, there are many great problems in science. There is the problem of the origin of life, the origin of the universe, the structure of space and time, and so on and so on. But the greatest problem of all is the problem of intelligence. Because if we can make any progress in it, if we can improve our own intelligence, then we can more easily solve all other great problems of science. And so that's when I decided to study the problem of intelligence, and that means understanding our own intelligence. That's really neuroscience and brain science, and also understanding how to create intelligent machines, how to replicate intelligence. And that's why I've been, in all my career, between neuroscience and computer science / artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Great, and of course there are many types of intelligence,
yeah,
as we discovered probably.
Right.
What were some surprises, maybe that's one of them, but what were some surprises to you that you've seen over the past 50 plus years in this quest for intelligence?
Well, one surprise was, in fact, how long it took for computer science to realize the importance of machine learning. For about 50 years, modern computer science starts more or less with Alan Turing. This is the 50s. And for the first, I would say, 40 years or so, computer science was basically programming. You give instruction to a computer, you person design the algorithms. But what started to become clear only recently, but the idea was older. I started work on it in the 90s. So this was probably just before you arrived as a graduate student in my group. The idea is, instead of programming, learn from examples. learn from data. And this is really, I think, is a major shift in paradigm for computer science. Is one of the situations which my ex-colleague Thomas Kuhn defined as a scientific revolution. It's a big change in perspective. Instead of programming, you have a machine that learns. And I think it took me 15 years to convince the computer science department at MIT to plunge into machine learning. And it's not an accident that most of the people who contributed to machine learning at the beginning, including me, but people like Geoffrey Hinton, who got a Nobel Prize in physics recently, are not computer scientists. The revolution had to come from outside, not from inside. So that's one surprise.
Similar to innovation in general, I understood Clayton Christensen, somebody mentioned before, if I got it right. So disruptive innovation requires something sometimes from the outside.
From the outside,
exactly. Right. Thomas Kuhn is also a little bit like that. Right? Another one, maybe a surprise you are expecting going forward, whatever.
Well, a surprise that I did not expect to happen so quickly is certainly large language model. 2017 transformers. We were all surprised by how effective is the training on the next word, by training this system on large amounts of internet data, training to predict a missing word given the context, turns out to be quite incredibly powerful. And so this was not expected.
And you think going forward, do we see any surprise coming, or maybe surprise in the dynamics of innovation and how ideas will speed up or not?
Yeah, the big, I don't know how to feel about it. The question is whether the current architecture, like large language model, transformers, will lead us to intelligence really at our level and at super intelligence perhaps, or we'll need different architecture. So, another surprise has been until 10 years ago or so, I thought, maybe even longer, I thought, and several other people thought, including Demis, for instance, Demis at DeepMind, thought that the way to get to intelligent machines was first to understand better our brain, our own intelligence. A surprise in the last 10 years is that it looks like that in the first decade or so of machine learning, in fact, machine learning was inspired by neuroscience. Some of the key algorithms, deep learning and reinforcement learning, come really from neuroscience. But the last 10 years have been different. It's like engineering has been doing very well, like with large language models, without really a direct connection with neuroscience. And so the question is, will this approach, the engineering one, continue and be successful, or we need to go back to neuroscience for the final breakthroughs?
Great questions. Thanks, Tommy. Let me switch gears a bit and go a little bit to society and Europe and Italy. So far, clearly, the innovations, including transformers and language models, come from the US, even though DeepMind started in the UK, but now the team is also in the US. Is there anything for Europe to focus on? And I'm going to kind of classify 2 dimensions. One is the innovation side, AI innovation, technological innovation. The other is the adoption side, and what should we be doing here to catch up, or at least to go ahead?
Right. So I think it's not going to be easy, but it's quite possible for Europe to do well in both areas. In the first one, innovation, we are still in the situation in which, somewhat ironic, that we build these systems like large language model transformers, but we don't really understand why they work as well as they do. We don't have a theory. So I think that, you know, there is a lot of possibilities, challenges that can be approached and solved there. And Europe can certainly do it. China, there are a number of countries that can really make major breakthroughs from the fundamental science point of view. And this should translate into new architecture, new applications, new powerful system. That's the first
So we are
part.
there is still way ahead of us.
Right.
The game is not over in terms of innovation, so therefore we can do stuff.
Yeah. You know, it's a little bit like the discovery of electricity by Alessandro Volta was somewhat random. It was really a major event in the science because it started really the science of electricity, which has been among all our sciences, the one that has an intrinsic Moore law, doubling in performance every few years. And it did the discovery accidentally, but typical academic motivation, wanted to show that a colleague of his, Galvani, was wrong. But this transformed things. There were electrical motors and generators and telegraph lines shortly after the discovery of the pile. But it was not until 60 years later that we had a theory. It was Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism. And then, of course, there were many even bigger discoveries, like the radio and the radar and the internet and computers and so on. So we are still between Volta and Maxwell. There is a lot to be done.
And Maxwell was British. Volta was Italian, so the British did something to the Italians, and maybe the Italians can do something to the British now. Or the Americans. Quick one, and maybe we can touch on this fast. A caution, a tale of caution. You were in an autonomous driving car yourself in Stuttgart in 1995 from Mercedes, right? Something like this, around that time. And then we know that somehow Mercedes and the German auto industry kind of lost the game of autonomous driving, and the time was computer vision. Is there a lesson for us to get out of this, or what happened?
Yeah, this was, I think, a 2 or 3 days workshop in Stuttgart, organized by Daimler-Benz, Mercedes. And as part of this workshop, there was a demonstration of a Mercedes driving autonomously in the streets of Stuttgart, very slowly, very carefully. But this was more than 25 years ago. The trunk was full of computers. They were not small enough at the time, but the system was working. And then I think management basically disbanded the research unit that had developed this system. So probably they were too early. And also, I remember that the last day of the workshop was lawyers discussing about the legal dangers of having autonomous cars.
Lots of lessons there, the dangers of AI today, European approach versus the J.D. Vance talk to Paris Summit a couple of weeks ago. Last part, you wrote a book that was there, but now it's not there, and I forgot it on the chair. Last year, right? It's now in Italian. We co-wrote with our friend Marco.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the book? What is it about? Any story from there to share?
Well, I guess it's a personal history, a bit autobiographical on AI. There are some topics, some of them we discussed, kind of question of what has happened and what will happen perhaps in the near future. I think it's very difficult to write about it. Marco has been, now the book has been translated, will be updated, translated in English by MIT Press. and so will come out. But Marco has been really stressed by the fact that the field of AI is developing so rapidly that every week we need to do an update. So that's also a caution note. I see many estimates of the impact of AI on the economy, on the business world, on whatever. And all of these estimates, for instance, my colleague in the economics department who got the Nobel Prize recently has been kind of pessimistic about the impact of AI in the economy of the US. But he and all the other estimates typically assume that the AI system will remain as they are. And that's really very far from true. I know that 2 years ago, ChatGPT could not really describe a visual scene, and now it's very, very good. A year ago, I could not really use it for my work, and now I can collaborate with ChatGPT improving theorems, which is, so a few months. And, this may saturate, maybe there is a limit to intelligence, like there is a limit to the speed of light, but maybe not, or not so soon.
And of course, I fully agree with you. I don't think economists or business people are equipped to answer questions about the impact of AI in the world, because that's much more a scientific question, as we discovered, than a business and economics question. However, we should all be ready to react and adapt and innovate and adopt it, which is the job of probably most of the audience here, in order to progress and create the value that people talked about. Quick one, any story you'd like to share from the book, if there is one? Or maybe you mentioned this nice story about the intelligence yesterday, we were having lunch, or maybe another one, I don't know.
Well, there are a lot of stories there. I'm not sure what would be a good one. Do you have any suggestions?
I like the one with the mouse you said yesterday. I don't know if it's in the book.
Oh, that's a little bit of going back to why I was interested in intelligence. Yes, there is a novel called titled "Flowers for Algernon," and there was also a movie made out of it called, I think, Charlie. And the short version of the novel, very gripping, which I recommend highly, is a story of a pair of surgeons that find a way to do an operation to increase intelligence. They do it on a mouse. The name of the mouse is Algernon. And Algernon becomes more and more intelligent after the operation and is better and better at solving navigating mazes. Then they decide to do the same operation to a guy who has a very low IQ, a moron, that is cleaning toilets in the lab. And the novel is written as a diary by Charlie, this guy. And so at the beginning, the diary is very terrible, fragmented English. And then after the operation becomes better and better and better. He becomes more and more intelligent at the level of being a genius, and by looking at what the surgeons have done, comes up with a conclusion that the effect of the operation will not last, they will decay. And in fact, he sees the mouse Algernon becoming less and less intelligent, his performance is decreasing, and he knows that the same will happen to him. So this is the tragedy of an intelligent or super intelligent being, knowing that we lose this understanding of everything and of the world. It's creeping and tragic.
It's a fantastic story with lots of lessons behind this. Last yes/no question, because time is up. AlphaFold through Demis, or Demis through AlphaFold got the Nobel Prize this year in chemistry. Do you think AI itself will come up with some questions and or answers itself that will deserve a Nobel Prize anytime soon?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. After the results of AlphaFold, this was 4 years ago or so, Demis came to give a talk at MIT, and I introduced him saying, this is probably the first time that a computer program will get a Nobel Prize. I was half right, half wrong. Yeah, and your point is very well taken. You know, what this system don't have yet, although it may not be difficult to change that, is they are not curious. They don't ask questions. Right? So I think maybe once we'll have a ChatGPT 10, whatever, that will come up with a research idea and ask a question, and answer it, then it will be the time in which we will have to give it or him a Nobel Prize.
But they can still come with good answers to existing questions, probably, right? Tommy, thank you very much for this. Thank you for everything.
Well, thank you, Theos.